A voice calls out from the stormy night. Faithful ground with a broken stand, building hope with a steady hand. Faithless rises like the morning sun, guiding passes till the work is done.
All right, and welcome back. Welcome back to the Faith Nest podcast. We are in season 1, episode 4, and I am your host, Rudy Swigart. And I'm just excited if you've been around the last few weeks with getting this podcast off the ground. This is the culmination of the first month. This is episode 4. We're dropping episodes every single week on whatever channel you might be listening on. We're on the Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on several others, and also on YouTube. So maybe you're listening to this on the audio on Spotify, or you're watching this on the YouTube as well. Just know that we are super excited with what has been going on behind the scenes in just pulling this platform together, and then also talking about what this platform is about here on the podcast. So we are in episode 4 of season 1. Faith Nest, first and foremost, is a coaching platform. That is what Faith Nest is all about. That is the cornerstone, if you will, of the organization. We are many other things as well. We offer directories for pulpit supply pastors. We offer directories for biblical counselors. We offer directories for spiritual directors, and probably going to be adding some other directories for different types of coaching, whether it's business coaching or health and wellness or other areas, relationship coaching, which falls into discipleship for the Christian community as well, because we all need that. We all need to have somebody, especially in a Christian context, that we allow to mentor and coach and speak into us and hold us accountable. And then also, if we're walking out this Great Commission calling, we're also discipling others. So we're allowing ourselves to be poured into from a leader, mentor, coach. And then we're also, in the framework and context of our adult Christianity, we're seeking to mentor or to coach or disciple others. And that is an ongoing thing. That's not just something that you walk into and say, okay, I'm a church leader, I'm done, I don't need to do that anymore. But the impetus behind this organization and this coaching platform has been through my own experience as to the support or the lack of support that lead pastors in a small church context receive. And when I say lack of support, I'm just talking about where ministries are championed or where ideas are brought to bear, or if there's been no mentorship or no leadership, rather than a critical board that might be assessing or poking at the pastor's every move. These are circumstances by which makes the calling of the ministry extremely challenging. These are circumstances that makes the calling of the ministry leading to burnout and a lack of balance and just really hard feelings and hard times as we work through some of the changes that take place in the world and in a congregation. And these things, if they go unchecked, they lead to church hurt. They lead to church hurt. They lead to congregants leaving. They lead to pastors stepping down and never coming back into the calling, because church hurt is also something that pastors experience. You might not be aware of that, or maybe you are all too familiar with it. But just know that Faith Nest exists to come alongside pastors and lay leaders and to make sure that they are equipped for the sustainable ministry. Your calling will not leave you. The Lord has a calling on your life. And so I just wanted to take a moment to encourage you. If you're a pastor and you're listening to this episode and you're feeling at the end of yourself or maybe unsupported, that the Lord sees you. The Lord wants to continue to equip you and nurture you. And sometimes that means you have to take a step back or a step aside and get back into the healthy rhythms of rest and restoration, spiritual direction, sabbatical, whatever that looks like for you. The Sabbath, you need to do those things, but know that the calling never leaves. And also the things that never leave, the things that are always the same that you can count on each and every week and each and every Sunday, is that something will be different. Something will be different each and every week and each and every Sunday. And sometimes change makes some of us uneasy. It makes some of us anxious. Talk to some of the older folks that have been on the elder board or been a part of church leadership for decades, and try to introduce something new, and they might become anxious over that, or they might say, no, we don't need to bring in a new worship team, or we can continue doing things the way that they've been done for the last 30 years, because that is what we know, that is what we're comfortable with. And to change things would really skew some people's sense of security and sense of peace. And so, in and of itself, change creates anxiety. In and of itself, change might create uncertainty about the future. And I know for a lot of us across this nation and around the world, for a lot of us, COVID-19 did just that. COVID-19 shook the nation, it shook the world to questioning and maybe being uncertain about what was to come tomorrow. The information was seemingly coming at us each and every day, and it was different. There were differing opinions, there were different thoughts. Here in the United States, you sprinkle in a election year in 2020, and it is chaos. It is chaos. Chaos within our country, divisive, this side and that side, wear this, don't wear this, get this vaccine, don't get this vaccine. Also divisive inside of our church. Inside of our church, I was a part of board meetings that spoke to how we go about the Sunday gathering. Do we continue to go about the Sunday gathering? How do we distance? Do we stay open? Do we shut down? I know many churches that shut down during that time period, and I know other churches that stayed open during that time period. And each decision point lived with the decisions that they made. Churches that stayed open had people getting sick, had people getting COVID, had family members potentially passing away with COVID. I hesitate to say from COVID because we just don't know if they passed away from COVID, or if the documentation was correct and that they contracted the virus of COVID-19, and then due to other complications in their lifestyle, they ended up passing away. Was it from COVID, or was it with COVID? But those things happen. Those things were going to happen whether or not the church stayed open or closed. Those things happened to family members. The church staying open was not the impetus for people passing away. The virus was impetus for people passing away, and their previous lifestyle and other things. So church leaders had the scrutiny of everybody. They had the scrutiny of maybe the state that you're in had something to say about it, maybe the laws of your state, maybe your county, and maybe your fellow congregants, not maybe, but your fellow congregants would also scrutinize the decisions that were made. Why are they staying open, or why are they closing down? I know churches that lost half of a congregation seemingly overnight because they aligned with one school of thought or another. Congregations split. People stopped going to church. And then after COVID, or maybe 6 to 9 months or a year into COVID, when doors began to open again, people chose to continue to stay isolated, to stay home, to maybe watch church online, maybe not, who knows, which is not the same. If you ever watched church service online, you know that it's not the same. It's not the same as being there. We are not to avoid the gathering. We are to participate in the gathering. But in our fear and our avoidance, it led us to maybe stay home or leave the faith altogether because we just didn't agree with what it was that church leadership was looking to do. They can't get their act together. I can't be a part of that organization. Maybe for you, you feel like your relationship with the Lord is just that. It's my relationship. I do it my way, and I don't always go to church or do things the church way because I don't need that, because my way is my way and it works for me. And that's dangerous. That is dangerous when you decide to separate yourself from the body. And so, as leaders, how do we disciple others? How do we nurture? How do we shepherd our flock appropriately? And what's this big idea around coaching? And why do we need coaching, especially through change, and especially after COVID? So, in today's episode, we're going to take a look at how COVID exposed these leadership gaps in many churches across the nation and around the world, the measurable fallout and the immeasurable fallout, and why coaching is essential as churches navigate pressures, be it political or cultural, because those things are always present. Here we are 5 years later, and political and cultural pressures, fear, and change still abound, still abound. So we need to pay attention to those things. And that's what we're going to be discussing here in today's episode. So I just wanted to remind you that the pandemic was more than a health crisis. It accelerated cultural shifts. It tested church systems like worship, like care, like governance, like technology. Thank the Lord that we have technology such as Zoom or some of the other platforms that we were able to stream and go live so that people could participate in some way, shape, or form. But leadership amidst the change is what determines whether a congregation survives, adapts, or fractures. I want to say that again, because this is where the true measure of leadership comes into play. And when I say true measure of leadership, I'm not just talking about the lead pastor. I'm talking about the associate pastor, the executive pastor, the elder board, the lay leaders, anybody that's involved from a leadership perspective. Leadership and coming together and not fracturing or separating is what determines whether a congregation survives, adapts, or fractures themselves. In my own personal church context, we had a fracture. And then we had, a couple years later, we had the lead pastor left and a new pastor came in, a different transition. And so they were fractured again. And then a couple years later, the church closed its doors, fractured again. So the pastor didn't leave and the church doors didn't close because of COVID. However, there are ripple effects when traumatic, big changes happen. There are ripple effects that take place. And guess who loves to play around in the ripple effects? The enemy of our soul, as you would suspect. The enemy of our soul loves to play around in the ripple effects, in the fears and the doubts and the different feelings that are stirred up amidst trauma and amidst change. And I call that the fallout. So before we talk about coaching through change, let's take a look at some of the data. Let's take a look at numbers and the fallout that took place surrounding COVID and the patterns that emerged. So Pew Research, you might be familiar, shows that COVID changed attendance patterns, and it's had lasting effects on how people attend church services. Many churches saw attendance drop, and some haven't returned to pre-pandemic rhythms. I think we're starting to get there. I think people are starting to to rediscover what it is to enter into the church building and allow themselves to be loved on within the body of Christ because they know that there's emptiness without the body of Christ. But overall attendance across the country remains lower. Gallup found weekly attendance has remained lower on average compared with pre-pandemic levels. Early data shows a drop from approximately 34% pre-pandemic to about 30% after. And churches, large and small, have had ongoing struggles and their rebounds have staggered. Lifeway, you guys may be familiar with Lifeway. Lifeway research indicates many churches were gathering again in person by 2023, but that recovery stalled and local contexts varied widely. Some rebounded well, and others lagged and ultimately closed their doors. So we have to kind of sort through the information post COVID and take a look at what continues to happen each and every year, each and every month or quarter or season. Some recent research, the Hartford Institute reports that COVID accelerated ideological sorting in congregants has shifted toward churches that match their political social expectations, meaning if you were on the conservative side of things during COVID, you were about freedom and wanting things to stay open. And therefore, you went and found a church that stayed open, that preached toward we're going to keep our rights as Christians and we're going to continue to exercise our rights as Christians because we have them. We're not going to be afraid of what it is that is taking place in our nation or around the world. We're not going to be afraid of what Dr. Fauci says or anybody else says. We're not going to be afraid or bullied into getting, I've heard it called the jab. We're not going to be bullied into getting the jab, getting the vaccine, because we have a God that provided us with an immune system, and we want to go and listen to a message at a church that is going to support that ideology. And on the other side of the coin, if you find that it was irresponsible for churches to stay open during that time frame, you gravitated towards a more liberal church that was more, maybe to use a word or for lack of a better word, maybe more sensitive or caring to their congregation. Not that the the conservative churches didn't care. There was just a bigger ideology taking place at hand. So churches split. They split down the middle. And then when people returned, they gravitated towards a church that was more aligned with social political ideology, which is sad in a way because in the body of Christ, we're going to have differences. We're going to have different opinions. We're going to have different thoughts. And we should be able to celebrate together and celebrate our differences together as we are all broken and all falling short of the glory of God. And therefore, we want to come together and hear the teaching together in community. That's, as a matter of fact, that's what the Lord calls us to. We are called to be different. We are not called to be divisive or finger pointing. Yes, we have feelings about these things. Some of us have very strong, passionate feelings about those things, myself included, in certain times. And sitting with somebody that shares maybe a different opinion is okay to do as well. So how do church leaders then navigate through that trauma, through that change? How do they shepherd the ultra conservative or the ultra liberal and the different feelings that are taking place within their flock? And that's what it is that spurs conversations like these today, that brings us into 2025 and into this discussion that says, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes shepherds get it wrong, or they behave out of stress, or they make decisions under duress based on what they think is right, based on what they think is most biblical. And sometimes that doesn't always work out. So leaders need to pause. They need to seek wise counsel. If it's not within their board, or if it's somewhere else, they need to seek a coach, so that way they can continue to guide and lead well for the sustainable future. So there's a wider trend of church closures and contraction that's just taken place over the last 5 years across the broader religious landscape, not just within Christianity. Shifts have continued. Most churches have reported significant loss or closures. Thousands of churches or church closures are linked to long-term decline or changing affiliation. And so that again shows where people start to question when things change. When a church leader leaves, as an example, we'll talk about transition. When church leaders leave, that is a shock to the system. And maybe that causes other lay leaders to think, well, maybe it's time for me to leave too. So when these major things happen, people start to question if they're really in the place that God wants them to be, or if they're needing to move on. So what are the practical reasons congregations fractured or lost members, right? And the two big buckets that we discussed, these are political and these are emotional. These are responses from leaders, and how the church congregation responded, whether their passions were more so on the political side or on the emotional side, and how the church leaders responded or how they didn't respond. And so those are the issues at hand. Those are the issues that we saw unfold before us over the last 5 years. I wonder how, while we talk about church leadership and congregations leaving and splitting, I wonder how many church leaders are no longer on the platform teaching and preaching from the pulpit as a result of those things. Churches became arenas in some areas for cultural, political disagreement, right? These mask mandates, these vaccine stances, these public health advisories or guidance that we were sought to follow. Some congregants perceived political stances by leaders or by other members, and that led to the departure or friction. And so internally, here's what change does. It brings us to a fear-driven response. It brings us into a fight or flight mode, which is trauma-based. And many people stayed home out of fear or trauma. And for some, prolonged distance then severed their spiritual disciplines or their spiritual habits or communion with the congregation. And some disagreed with how the church responded, either too strict or too relaxed, and they left. And Pew and Lifeway note these patterns that we talked about before. So there are compounding issues. When leaders react pragmatically, either closing their doors, choosing to live stream, or remaining open, they often didn't have time or systems to shepherd pastoral conflicts or these transitions, or to re-engage a dispersed flock. How is a pastor to do that? I would encourage pastors to continue to pick up the phone, to call their congregation, to check in with them, each and every one of them, to re-engage a dispersed flock, to send out newsletters, to communicate the things that are important to the mission, vision, values of the church. Given this reality, here's what church leadership coaching can help with. Leadership coaching can help with making sure that there's pastoral care still taking place among some of these major movements and cultural responses. Pastoral care for the congregation, for the flock, to make sure that they are protected. And that, at the end of the day, leaders, is what's most important, is making sure that your flock is shepherded well. That your flock is shepherded in the manner that the Lord shepherds you. People often will ask the question and say, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus react this way, or would Jesus respond this way given similar circumstances? All that to say is when things like COVID happen, everybody is impacted. Everybody has feelings. Everybody has opinions. Everybody has ideas. Some of them go far right. Some of them go far left. In the middle of all of that is a unity that the Christian community needs to continue to adhere to. This is where coaching helps. This is where pastoral care teams help. Lead pastor, you go ahead and teach and preach the word of God. Spend time with the Lord as you should, seeking wise counsel, spiritual direction, crafting messages, and preaching because Sunday still comes every week. Associate pastors can also get involved with pastoral care, the hospital visits, the phone calls, the check-ins, the making sure that families are not freaking out or running into crisis of their own with things like divorce or addictions or other ways that they choose to react to the landscape shifting. This is where coaching comes into play. This is not about theology. This is about change management, change leadership and pastoral care in messy contexts. Messy contexts. Context is often messy. There's only a few times during the year that it feels like we're on cruise control. And then things hit the fan, right? So because things get messy sometimes at the drop of a hat. And so we need to be aware of that. And so leadership coaching supports churches through change. And that's what Faith Nest is all about. Faith Nest, first and foremost, like I mentioned before, is a coaching platform. We are a team of leaders that have experienced change and change management, that have the ability, the wherewithal, and the skill sets to be able to lead others through change and change management. Wherever you might be focused. Are you focused on pastoral care? Are you focused on growth? Are you focused on your mission, vision, values? Are you focused on rest and restoration and respite, sabbatical? This is where coaching comes alongside. This is what Faithness comes alongside to do. Things like emotional and relational processing, right? Coaching provides confidential space for leaders to process. Leaders need to process. We've said this before. The circle that a leader can speak to becomes very small when they accept the mantle of leadership. They can't just open kimono in a men's group, confess their habitual sin like they used to do when they were not a leader, to allow other men to pray with them and pray for them and to hold up their arms. When they enter into leadership, that conversation or that audience for that conversation changes because everybody is critical of the leader. And then gossip comes out and all sorts of things come out and divisiveness comes out. And so we just need to be aware of those things. And so coaching provides a confidential space for leaders to process guilt, fear, anger, grief, fill in the blank, and to craft responses that are pastoral rather than reactive. And that's key. That's key. How we respond is different than how we react. Coaching also allows decision making under complexity. Coaches help leaders clarify values, weigh trade-offs, pros and cons, and craft communication that centers mission over political agenda. Coaching equips leaders works to manage congregational conflict. Congregational conflict, just going to let that rest out there for a moment because the congregation will have conflict in certain areas, not just over these major things. I was in my previous church, I had two two ladies that had conflict with each other that went unresolved, and one of them ended up leaving the church. It was so challenging. How did the lead pastor manage that conflict? Did he wait too long? Did he not react quick enough? Did he not listen well? Like what was going on? Congregational conflict happens in the most obscure places that we don't ever expect them to happen. Coaching can help to mediate those conversations. It can help to restore trust. Coaching rebuilds rhythms, and it brings in playbooks, practical plans for onboarding, re-onboarding dispersed congregants. Let's get them back. Right? Let's put together some worship strategies. Let's revitalize or reactivate your volunteer base and your pastoral care teams. Let's pull all of those things back together. Let's stop being scattered and pull back in for wellness, for focus, for clarity, and for moving forward. Because these things are sustainable, and that's what we're after: sustainable leader health. Coaches build sustainable rhythms like rest and spiritual practices so leaders aren't the next casualty of crisis management. I don't want you to be the next casualty of crisis management. I don't want you to be the next casualty of burnout. And that's where coaching comes in. Pastor A might implement a weekly phone check of their top 20 inactive congregants and town hall conversations facilitated by a coach regaining 15% of pre-pandemic core. What would it look like if you just regained 15% of your pre-pandemic core? Right? I want you to know that these little things, implementing, having prayer meetings, inviting people into town hall conversations that are facilitated by the coach, making phone calls, checking in with your inactive congregations, that this could lead to restoration. This could lead to people coming back. And so if they come back, what does this mean for you as a leader? All right, let's pull this together into practical next steps. What are your takeaways? Like, what is it that you're to do or to think about between now and maybe this next episode? One, I want to encourage you to reach out to schedule a 30-minute discovery call with Faith Nest. I'm going to put the link to the Calendly here in this episode so that way you have it. I'm going to try to continue to put the link in all of our descriptions on this podcast, but I want you to recognize that there is help and resources available. So for you as a leader, what I would like for you to do is create a short re-engagement plan. If you don't know where to start, let's get on that discovery call. Let's put together a re-engagement plan for people who have disengaged. And if you did well, or your connection team did well, and you captured email addresses and you had a newsletter and those sorts of things, and you have people's information, phone numbers and email addresses, but put together a short re-engagement plan for people who you haven't seen in the last few months. And that could be phone calls, that could be small groups, that could be listening sessions, it could be coffee, it could be dinner, whatever the case may be. Let's re-engage. And you might be wondering, man, I'm putting together sermons during the week. I don't have time to make phone calls. I don't have time to re-engage. And maybe you don't have a team like an associate pastor that can do this for you. Then this is another reason why I want you to reach out to us for your 30-minute discovery call. Schedule a coaching session or an accountability conversation. Let's do it. Let's get an outside perspective. I want you to bring those things to the table and prioritize a visible act of reconciliation or clarity. And that might mean on Sunday morning when you stand in front of the congregation to deliver your message that you prioritize reconciliation, that you reinforce or bring clarity back to your mission, vision, values. You submit maybe a public statement that can be a newsletter, that can be on your social media channel. You can put together Q&A or FAQs. or a pastoral letter that's personally signed by you that focuses on mission and care versus politics. We want to focus on biblical mission and care versus politics. And that's hard for us sometimes to separate. There are far left churches, there are far right churches where they mingle politics and biblical teaching every single week. And while there's space for that and time for that as we react to the cultural shifts of the day, it's not where we need to live. We don't need to live and stay in the political rises and falls of one candidate or another. And I'm probably going to lose some listeners for stating these, but it is what I think the Lord has been calling us towards, is that we want to move now towards reconciliation. We want to move now with a clarity and a purpose to bring people back together. So, Faith Nest coaches with emotional processing, change leadership, and practical playbooks. And I want you to book recall. I'll put that information for the Calendly link here also. Also, you can find us online at faithnestsolutions.com. That will be up and running for you as well. And I just want you to know that you're not alone at all, that you can continue to lead well, that you can continue to grow, that you can continue to shepherd and serve and love your flock well, that you can continue to be supported, that you can continue to walk out the calling that the Lord has for your life, where He has blessed you in the position that He has you, operating and utilizing all of your gifts for teaching and preaching and loving and shepherding and moving forward in discipling, bringing in, inaugurating God's kingdom in your local area and beyond. So God bless you. I hope this episode has helped. Has put together maybe some framework surrounding which you can continue to improve, listen to the movement of the Spirit, grab a hold of the resources that are available to you, and let's continue to build God's kingdom together. God bless you. I'll check in with you next time.
Heavy heart searching the light, lost in the dark but holding tight. A voice calls out from the stormy night. Faithful ground where the broken stand, building hope with a steady hand. Faith nest rises like the morning sun, guiding past us till the work is